and today you're going to learn about how to better equip yourself to identify and defend your mind against the visual methods employed by the corporate sector, secret societies, and institutions. This is an introductory video explaining the symbology of the blade, the chalice, and the Star of David, and how it's used today to influence humanity on a subconscious level. At the end of the video, I am going to touch on the topic of Freemasonry as well and give some examples of its influence on mainstream culture where I live. So just quickly, I've written essays on advertising and its techniques. I've also studied fundamentals of design and colour theory. Plus, over the last few years, I've been a keen student of Mark Passio's work in relation to occult symbology, and occult simply meaning hidden knowledge. Okay. Now, whether we like it or not, imagery plays a major role on influencing our behaviour. And our brains are instinctually wired to interpret certain visual cues and also ancient symbols. And knowledge of this is exploited by those in the know on the unsuspecting masses. And every day we are bombarded literally with visual imagery, advertising, brands, icons, and signs that have in actual fact ancient symbology embedded within them. So we have to become symbol literate to lessen their effect and understand their underlying meaning. And the cult classic 1988 film They Live is a great allegory of this. And you have the hero archetype in the film who finds a pair of sunglasses which, when worn, enable the wearer to see the truth around him, of the real world around him. And the glasses decode the real meaning behind the billboards, systems, and advertising surrounding us. So the intent of this video is me metaphorically handing you a set of these sunglasses. So acts of communication are generally built upon existing codes and connotations, and there are certain signs which have arisen in widely separated communities that convey shared human experience and stable meanings. And these particular signs, they take on the status of icons. Okay, and look, the triangle, the first polygon, is a strong, stable structure that is easily identifiable and used by all cultures. Now, Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung termed certain symbols, characters, and stories as archetypes, and he proposed those archetypes are archaic remnants from the dawn of human consciousness. And additionally, he conceived the concept of a universal unconscious. He states that archetypes are a reservoir of shared universal symbols or patterns in the collective unconscious. This is something we all have the ability to actually tap into subconsciously or consciously when we educate ourselves. And let's start by taking the upwards pointing triangle, and this is esoterically known as the blade. It can be associated with the left-hand side of the brain, and it symbolizes strength, action, protection, and the divine masculine. It additionally represents the power to cut through obstacles, defend against threats. Okay, and in some traditions, the blade is used in rituals, symbolizing the carving out of new paths, for example, and protecting what is sacred and embodying courage and determination. It is also linked to gods and the sun, and in ancient Egypt, the blade was connected to the god Osiris and Ra, and the obelisk, which you see all over the world, essentially being a prime architectural example of Egyptian male symbology. In Celtic culture, it represented the sword of truth and justice, and in Arthurian legend, the blade is represented by the sword Excalibur, symbolizing strength, honor, and it's only able to be wielded by those whom are virtuous and worthy. So we'll now go on to the downwards pointing triangle, which is esoterically known as the chalice. And it corresponds with the right-hand side of the brain, symbolizing receptivity, intuition, and the divine feminine. Traditionally, it has been representative of the womb, the vessel of life, and the power of creation. In spiritual practice, it's been used to hold water, wine, or other sacred liquids. symbolizing the flow of life, purification, and transformation. The chalice also has its associations with the goddess, moon, and lunar concepts. In ancient Egypt, it was linked to the goddess Isis, representing fertility. In Celtic tradition, it was associated with the cauldron of rebirth, and in Arthurian mythology, it draws parallels with the Holy Grail, a sacred vessel containing mystical powers and the ability to grant eternal life. So when we merge them and when they're combined, they form a powerful symbol of wholeness, creating a harmonious dynamic essential for growth. And it is known as the Star of David, which is indicative of the stellar cult and is associated with Judaism. It also is known as the Seal of Solomon, signifying oneness. And if we actually break down the word Solomon, we end up with the word sol, S-O-L, in Latin, meaning sun, and its root of the words solstice and solar. If we go to the second part of the word mon, it has links to the word moon, and it is the root of the words Monday and month. So if you were to transform the Seal of Solomon into its three-dimensional iteration, you would have two intersecting tetrahedrons, creating a star tetrahedron or a Merkaba, which is actually symbolic of light. And on that note, I highly recommend visiting the Cosmic Core website, as it has a wealth of information you can delve into. And I've gone over, I would say, hundreds of their articles, and they have topics on human consciousness, life and matter, space and time. And additionally, they cover things like the sacred geometry, the golden ratio, and the Fibonacci sequence, and its links with the natural world. Plus, they go into detail in their articles about the Platonic solids, their relationship with modern physics, and I'll leave a link in the description below. And there are many symbols which share a resemblance to the Star of David, the Freemason logo being one of them, with its upward pointing compass and downwards pointing square or set square. And look, Freemasonry, it began in England. Since then, it's spread throughout the world, including to here in Australia. And in its unadulterated classical form, Freemasonry provides key insights, valuable lessons and spiritual teachings. Consensus among researchers of occult knowledge today suggests modern versions of these organizations and those similar have been possibly infiltrated, and some practitioners within it deviating from the teaching's original intent. It's possible some of those within its fraternity are pushing secretive agendas, and high-profile politicians have been and likely still are Freemasons, and it's documented on the Victorian website. You can verify it for yourself. Victorian website of Freemasonry, that in fact the first Australian Prime Minister, Sir Edmund Barton, was a Freemason. And I want to read an excerpt regarding Freemasonry's influence on sport. It refers particularly to cricket. And this information was directly taken from that website I just mentioned previously. And I quote, Sir William Clark, first Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of Victoria, was the man who is responsible for the Cricket Ashes. And in 1884, after visiting England and watching the Australian cricket team beat England for the first time, Sir William invited the entire English team to his residence in Sunbury. He proceeded to burn the bales, so these are little timber things that sit on top of the stumps if you're not familiar with cricket, and from a stump, and place them in a special ceramic urn, which he then presented to the English team to mark the defeat. And so the ashes were born. They use the term born. They store the ashes in what is essentially a small chalice. Now, I live in New South Wales, but in Victoria, we've recently had the Australian Open tennis. Now, look, televised corporatized sport has not been my thing for a number of years now, even though you can see I'm into basketball up here behind me. However, not massively into sport as much as I used to be, but as I see it, in today's world, a modern bread and circus event and a bit of a distraction. But it is interesting to dissect the Australian Open logo, which I'll show now. The colour blue is used to bring the mind into a passive state of acceptance. The blade symbology itself can be seen in the design of the A, and the O could be interpreted as the monad, meaning one. It embodies the roundness of the moon, and if you were to look at it from top down, it could be interpreted as looking at the chalice from a top-down perspective. Now, the Melbourne United basketball team logo has all the hallmarks of the compass and square with distinct triangular shapes in its design. You'll find vehicle rego plates, as we shorten everything in Australia, but vehicle registration plates in Victoria depict the downwards pointing triangle with the accompanying slogan, the education state. And look, I prefer the play on words, the indoctrination state. Victoria had some of the most tyrannical responses in the world against the people during the pandemic, and I highly recommend checking out Mark Passio's huge volume of work, one of which he has a presentation analysing the occult mockery of police and military, and he breaks down the symbology of the Victorian police uniform in a lot of detail. I will link his presentation in the description below. So, in conclusion, it is evident that these embedded codes within culture and consciousness are manipulated as a form of mind control. Massive amounts of funding is used by the corporate sector and government think tanks to ensure, large market share and, unfortunately, lines of obedient automatons, and ancient techniques are employed by hidden secret cults that do indeed exist to keep the bulk of humanity in a state of low consciousness, and ultimately in a condition in which people are easier to control. If we are to understand the world at large around us and why the powers that be are positioned the way they are currently, we need to become symbol literate and understand the appropriation of ancient archetypes in our modern world.